Hello, everyone. Welcome to Live. I'm your host, Liam, aka Himvar. Today, I have another episode of Word Museum for you. For those unaware, this is largely a look at etymology. I try to connect it back to fantasy fiction or some form of fiction. Try to make it interesting for most of you, since this is something I just find interesting on its own. I know a lot of the people who watch this channel are mostly here for speculative fiction. So today, this is only my fourth episode. You can go back, look at the playlist. I have extra videos in that playlist, but you can look at the words we've looked at before. Normally, I look at more than one word each episode. And this episode, we're going to look at two in particular. I'll give you cognates as well. Or synonyms, I guess you could say. So those words, though, kind of dealing with our last episode, which we looked at companions, friends, fellowship. This is also kind of Tolkien related. This is going to be rings and mathoms. That's the episode for today. And so let's start with the rings first. I guess maybe I should go with the word ring just to get it out of the way. That's not the word I have here first in my notes, but the word ring comes from Middle English, ring, and it comes from the Old English ring. There's an H, and we gave you the Old English word, but otherwise it looks exactly like ring. You would say the G though, of course, which comes from Proto-Germanic ringaz, which comes from Proto-Indo-European, and this one is awfully weird. It comes from kreng as a root or skreng, something like that. So, which is extended in, I think, nasalized to get scare, which means to turn or bend. Doublets are rink, and it is related to the words like curve and cancer and circus. So that's ring. Now, there's another word that I think is rather interesting. So we have actually Bach or Bech, depending on who you ask how to say it in Old English. This modern word is bee, but you've probably never heard the word bee spelled exactly like the bzz bee, but it means ring. So you have this word is actually related to the word bagel. Okay, so when I say Bach, that could also be Bach. It's a G, right? So it comes from the Old English Bauch, B-E-A-G, B-E-A-H, Proto-Germanic Bauchgas, from the verb beugana, which means to bend. It comes from the Proto-Indo-European beuch. I'm totally butchering that last one, I'm sure. That's a root, again, which means the same thing as the Proto-Germanic. It's cognate to the Sanskrit, I'm going to butcher this as well, brujati, which means to bend or curve. So Bauch is only used in historical connotations these days. Today, again, the modern synonym is B, which again means ring, torque, bracelet. I have a B on my finger right here. The Icelandic Baugar and German dialectal. I don't know which dialect has this actually, but there is apparently a German dialectal word Baug, which is the same word, right? Bagel is Yiddish. For those unaware, Yiddish is a Germanic language, more specifically German language. It comes from, I believe, Middle High German, if I'm remembering correctly. I should have looked that up beforehand. And Yiddish is kind of a mix of German words with Hebrew words, right? Because it's a language predominantly spoken by European Jews. So bagel, which right is a ring, makes sense to be related to this word, where we get again the modern English B. We have some examples I could give you that's kind of fantasy, right? This is going to go back into some Old English, but bar yifa, so which means ring giver, right? So Herr Athelstan King, he is here Athelstan King. He is the Drichten, which is Lord. Berna Bergiva. So he is the Lord of Earls, I should say. My notes here are actually messed up, but I think I actually have this open because I'm pretty sure this is the Battle of Malden. Thane of Earls. That's not how the Old English. I don't know where my Old English is. Yeah, wow. Where'd my old English go? All right, so anyways, it's supposed to be Lord of Earls, ring giver of warriors, right? So ring giver is a pretty common thing. I think I was reading Beowulf, Tom Shippey's Beowulf, not that long ago, and looking at the Old English because it's side by side. There was another example of that. So you'll see this word when you're reading Old English text, but not really a modern English unless you want to bring it back a learned, basically revival, which is exactly what Mathom is. Okay, so this gets us into Mathom. So Mathom, the Old English word is Mathom, spelled differently, be M-A, Thorn, or Thum, comes from the Proto-Germanic Mythmas, and Proto-Indo-European Moitmos, from moit, which means to exchange. It's related to Latin mutare, where we get English mutate, and mute as well, like you can't speak, as well as mew. I mean, like a cat mews, right? From French, we get that from French, from Latin, of course, through French, and we get borrowed into Old English from Latin. We get the word molt, M-O-U-L-T, and Mathom itself means exactly what it is in the Lord of the Rings, essentially. So what's cool, actually, that comes from this Proto-European word to exchange, is means it's part of the system of reciprocity. Now, reciprocity is basically a human element. When I studied anthropology, um, societies have reciprocity, right? There's idea that if you give something, you'll get something in return, or that you're both giving. Essentially, there is a mutual relationship where you're both getting and giving, and that's pretty normal, right? Like in Beowulf, at the very end of the book, it says like he most like basically most desired praise, right? He desires praise, and now what does it mean? Like he desires praise? Is that saying he's like some loser that likes to feel good because he wants people to like praise him? But it means no, that he's generous, essentially, right? That like if he is praiseworthy, that means he's giving a lot of stuff as well, as he's a good lord, essentially, right? In this case, so I want to look at Mathom real quick, in an excerpt, kind of like I did from Battle of Malden, even though my Malden translation got messed up and I didn't have it memorized well enough. But this is the Ubi Sunt from The Wanderer, another Old English poem. Chwar quum mar, chwar quum mago, chwar quum mathum yifa, chwar quum simbla yesitu, chwar sindan sela draumas. That is where now, blah, 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 blah. But basically, you've heard the Mathom Yifa, which means Mathom giver, essentially, just kind of like same as ring giver, right, that I mentioned earlier. So, I wanted to mention this one because this wanderer actually has, you're not going to see the word Mathom in this next example, but this text has like a kind of like a inspired by text, in the Lord of the Rings, right? From the Lament to the Rohirrim, there's also an Ubi Sunt, so the same thing as where is now the stain. So we have, where now the horse and the rider, where is the horn that was blowing, where is the helm and the hauberk and the bright hair flowing, where is the hand on the harpstring and the red fire glowing, where is the spring and the harvest, the tall corn growing. This is a great Ubi Sunt. Honestly, these two Ubi Suns are probably my favorite ever. The Wanderer is just an exceptional poem. For those unfamiliar with it, you should go listen to it. It's heartbreaking. But you do see this Ubi Sunt. But as far as Mathom's and Tolkien's work is going, we get him in Hobbit. So instead of there's an idea of this reciprocity that you'd get Mathom's also from killing people in the heroic age, kind of back in the very, very early Middle Ages. This idea that you would wear stuff on you, and when you died, the people who killed you would get these Mathoms, right? There's like this ring or whatever you're wearing or whatever it is that's on you, that's a Mathom, essentially, right? That it's something that like they get and you pass it on. That's a form of reciprocity in a weird way. But in the hobbits are not warlike, right? But this is actually in reference to some war, and that is the Battle of Greenfields. If you remember, where Bando Brass took routed an invasion of orcs right at that battle. Though there was still some store of weapons in the Shire, these were used mostly as trophies, hanging above hearths or on walls, or gathered in the museum at Mitchell Delving. The Mathom House, it was called, for anything that hobbits had no immediate use for, but were unwilling to throw away, they called a Mathom. Their dwellings were apt to become rather crowded with Mathoms, and many of the presents that passed from hand to hand were of that sort. Right, so again, passed from hand to hand. You have the hobbits have their own system of reciprocity as well. That is also, by the way, from the prologue of the Fellowship of the Ring. And so you have these basically they're just kind of little useless things that aren't quite 100% useless. So anyways, that's just my little look at rings and Mathoms. Hopefully that's fantasy enough for you or interesting enough for you. Sorry that I should have double checked my notes before this because they were a little messed up, but hopefully this is short and informative and interesting enough. I kind of have an idea for my next one of these word museums, but it looks like it's kind of getting out of hand, so I might split it up into different things. I was going to look at words for man and words for women and words for like people in general, and it's getting rather long, so might not do all of those in one video. So anyways, William from Williams Lyceum. I'll catch you next time.